papa's salty no more. Come home, little girl, your papa's salty no more. I need your love, and I swear I miss you so. I know I was wrong, and I know I've caused you pains. I know I was wrong, and I know I've caused you pains. I'm sorry, pretty baby, I won't do that again. Why, pretty baby, why did you have to go? Why, pretty baby, why did you have to go? Please come back home, pretty mama. Papa ain't salty no more.
I am the chair of the Citizen Review Board. At this time, the Tuesday, April 27th, 2021 meeting of the Citizen Review Board is now called to order. If you will, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, if you will, please conduct a roll call.
Banks, Collins, Simmons, Tamayo,
Here.
Reyes,
Here.
Guy, Akil,
Here.
Blair, Indengala.
Let the record show that all members of the Citizen Review Board are present, with the exception of Demetra Simmons, Bartholomew Banks, and Stephen Blair. At this time, I will ask my Vice Chair to read the meeting guidelines.
Please silence all electronic devices. The duties and responsibilities of the Citizens Review Board are to review completed department investigations involving use of force in cases of importance and interest to the community or the city, determine whether the disposition of reviewed cases was consistent with department policies and procedures, review matters of importance or interest and make recommendations regarding the handling of these matters, determine whether any revisions or additions to department policy and procedures are appropriate in reviewing matters of or importance or interest, report findings and recommendations to the mayor and chief of police. Cases that are brought before the Citizens Review Board are closed internal affairs cases that have been investigated and brought to the police chief for disposition. It is the Citizens Review Board's job to review the cases and render an opinion as to whether the investigation was done according to department policies and procedures. The Citizens Review Board members are provided the investigative files in advance of the meeting. The Citizens Review Board will hear from the department whenever matters of interest or importance are requested for review by the board or the department. As will be further discussed by the chair, members of the public will have an opportunity to address the Citizens Review Board during the public comment portion of the meeting. The coordinator for the board is Captain Kevin Schulmesters. Any person who wishes to make a complaint concerning a matter which may be considered by the Professional Standards Bureau should see Captain Schulmesters for information on how to file a complaint. The chair is responsible for maintaining an appropriate business-like decorum during the meetings. The board should not discuss matters where the city or the department may likely be a party to litigation. The public comment portion of the meeting is coming up early on the agenda, so if you wish to speak, please line up at the kiosk now so you can be called in order. Please maintain social distancing and wear your masks.
Thank you, Ms. Guy. Let the record show that Dr. Bartholomew Banks, as well as Stephen Blair, is now present. We will now move on with item D, approval of the minutes from the meeting of March 23rd, 2021. Are there any questions or provisions?
Yes, question.
Dr. Collins?
Just for a point of clarity, I did have an opportunity to interact with Ms. Mercer, but I want to make sure it's clear before we receive the minutes. If we look at the cases, I just want to make sure that the two cases that we looked at, they are kind of combined. And my question was if they could be listed separately, because we did approve one and we did not approve the other one. And then the statement that was added at the end of that just left me ambiguous. And I'm just trying to get clarity with on page 3, at the end of the two, it said there were no recommendations from the board because the violation has been corrected. I didn't understand that one. And before we approved the minutes, because we did approve one, I guess that was MOR, the standard of conduct on 1005, and then we did not approve 19S-004.
We did not make a recommendation because it had been corrected because the case was rather old. And so the department had already recognized that they needed to make some changes. That's my recollection.
And I do recall that, but not with this motion. I want to make sure that the second part of the motion was clear. That's all.
One moment. Mr. Schmidt, can you give some insight on in reference to the correction of the meeting minutes?
Yes, sir. I went back and reviewed. I always take handwritten notes as well, and I went back and reviewed my notes. There was only one case presented before the board. It was 19S-004. It was involving two potential policy violations, and maybe that's where Dr. Collins was confused. It was involving policy violation SOP 609.9 and MOR 1005. And I have notes that Dr. Collins made a motion that the finding be that it was consistent with MOR 1005, but not consistent with 609.9 with regards to the body-worn camera equipment. And it was seconded by Blair. There were 2 nays. And then there was a comment that the board was glad that it was glad that it revised, but still feel was engaged in call on foot and had no right to turn it off. Then Ms. Guy mentioned that it's something about he was on the way to a call and he was not required to have it on. So those were the basic discussions of it, but I think the confusion was that there was 2 policy potential violations, but there was only 1 case. So, and I think the minutes reflect that 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 you made a motion that it was consistent with 1005, but inconsistent with 609.9. So I think that may be where the confusion lies.
And still, it still is, because I just want to make sure that when we disagree with the fact that the camera was turned off and turned back on, it wasn't that we didn't disagree with that, the first part of the case, but the fact that the camera was turned off and then turned back on purpose so that the conversation would be negated and perhaps not heard, and it was pulled. That's what the concern was. So how do we do this when we disagree with one part, one of the findings, and agree with the other finding? And it says there was no recommendation because we did make a recommendation, but we disagreed with turning off that camera.
Well, I don't.
One moment. I believe under meeting minutes, under item 6, review of investigation, third paragraph, the very last line of page 2, it states, in addition, the board disagrees that the findings were consistent with the department policies and procedures for case number 19S-004 involving violation of SOP 609.9 body-worn camera equipment. However, the motion was carried with Tamayo and Guy voting no and Banks being present. So I think that paragraph reflects the meeting minutes correctly. Is that correct, Mr. Schmidt?
That reflects my notes. Yes, sir.
So that, I want to make sure when we close out the minutes, this is my only talking time, I want to make sure that when we close out the minutes, that we disagree with the body camera being turned off. Therefore, the majority vote of the board was to disagree with that policy.
Yes, sir. Yes,
And
ma'am.
and that's why I didn't understand why there were no recommendations. We made no recommendation, we just disagreed with the policy.
Correct.
So that meant we did not agree.
You disagree with the police
We
department's
disagree
findings.
with the fact that that particular policy on body worn cameras was in violation.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then to forget that with the minutes, because at least it shows that the majority did vote against it. There were no recommendations from the board because the violation had been corrected. Was that necessary?
I think we explained that the body-worn camera policy has been revised since then. That was explained.
Okay,
So
Can
that
we
issue
indicate
with
there
turning
then
it on
that-
and off was, the policy now is clear.
so can we indicate there that there were no recommendations for changes because the body worn camera policy has been, just make it clear. I don't want this to come back to
Yeah.
Right. So if we can indicate here, there were no recommendations from the board because the body worn camera, rather than the violation, because it seems like that violation had been corrected. The violation that they did was not corrected, the policy was corrected. Or maybe even change and say the body worn camera policy has been changed or corrected.
If the board wished to make, I do believe that discussion was had last time, discussing that exact issue, and that's why there were no, but if the board wished to have the minutes reflect that there was no recommendation made because the body-worn camera policy has already been amended, the board could make such a motion.
The chair will be open to a motion to specify that particular confusion to make it show more clarity. I do agree. I understand where the confusion comes in at. So the chair will be open to such a motion.
Before you make a motion, I just want to let Dr. Collins, which I did email you, and I made the statement to say the board did not have any recommendations to the department's policy and procedures pertaining to said matter.
You did do that?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I did email you that
Okay.
in my response back to you.
Repeat what you did.
Okay, the board did not have any recommendations to the department's policies and procedures pertaining to said matter.
Okay, can you change the said matter to be specific with the cameras? Because of everything that's going on in this country, I want to make sure that it's clear what we are saying. and it's with the camera. So rather than say it, ma'am, I think that's what got me with the violation. So if we could just say to the city, I didn't get your correction, I'm sorry, because you did. Very promptly, Ms. Mercer responded to me when I sent it to her, and she sent me a response back. And then I didn't see that one, but to the said, rather than saying the said matters, if we need a motion, you know, rather than doing a whole motion, it's just that if we can correct it, that the said matters is the body worn camera. And this is, I mean, it's not a change, it's just to make sure that we are specifically saying that this board addressed that at the meeting. And we did agree as a majority of the board.
Understood. I believe, though, if you wish to amend the minute to this point, it's probably safest for someone just to make a motion to amend.
So you want to make the motion that Ms. Mercer?
The motion to amend, as Ms. Mercer has written, changing, you wanted the last words to say,
Instead of saying say it, let's be specific. The said policy, say the body worn camera policy.
yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
Body worn camera, okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's my motion.
I second that motion.
Board Member Irene Guy has made a motion to amend the meetings to more specific verbiage in reference to the 609.9 body worn camera equipment held on Tuesday, March 23rd of 2021. Dr. Collins has seconded the motion of the amended meeting minutes for the Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Any further discussion? All in favor of support of the amended meeting minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Tamayo?
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Mr. Tamayo has moved to approve the minutes as amended. Dr. Collins has seconded the motion. Should we all vote on, let's continue with the vote on the amended meetings. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. That motion passes. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Mercer.
Next on the agenda is item E, public comment. Do we have any participants for a public comment before sharing the guidelines of the public comment portion and what is expected here at the meeting?
Chair, Captain Schoolmeesters has gone downstairs and confirmed there was nobody downstairs at the podium at this time. I would also, since I'm here, I'll let you know that there was no audio recordings either. We checked this morning and there was no audio recordings.
So we have no participants in reference to public comment here presently, as well as no recorded audio, as well as no voicemail or written comments for this meeting. That's going to conclude the public comment portion of our meeting. We will now continue with the agenda under item F, review of investigations. Tonight we will be reviewing PSB/IAU case number 19S-006 concerning the conduct of officers following a traffic stop, which led to sustained violations for MOR number 1001, personal conduct, MOR number 1200, professional conduct, and as well as MOR number 1210, courtesy to the public. Mr.
Chair,
Smith,
I'm
who-
sorry. Would you mind taking out of order the two matters and calling Dr. Brianna Fox so she can go first?
is a motion necessary from the board to,
It's chair's discretion.
No opposition
As-
from me.
as chair, to accommodate our guests in reference to the next presentation, I move to continue with item G, Community and Tampa Police Department matters, followed by item F, review of investigations. I believe we have Dr. Brianna Fox, if you will, approach the podium, state your name and title affiliation before you begin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brianna Fox. I'm an associate professor at the University of South Florida. Do you prefer that I keep my mask on, or it's up to you, however you normally have it?
I think you have 6 feet.
Is that
from
okay?
the-
Just so you can hear me, if that's all right. Okay.
Thank you.
I've been getting used to it over the past year, but I had to teach. I taught in person since last August, so I've gotten quite good at that. Thank you for having me here. I heard that you had specifically requested that I come here to give an update, and I was thrilled to hear that and to do so. So I have quite a few things. I'm going to try to keep it to 20 minutes or less, so we can make sure your meeting moves on quickly. But of course, if you have any questions as I go, please stop me and let me know. So as you know, I was asked by Mayor Castor pretty much about a year ago now to serve on the Mayor's Community Task Force on Policing. And the reason for this was after the murder of George Floyd and the civil unrest that followed, it seemed important that we really examined and took time to look at what issues were being faced here in our community and preventing something like this from happening here in Tampa. So because of my background and expertise, Mayor Castor and her team asked if I would serve as the research collaborator and person who would ultimately implement and evaluate the policies and programs that I had recommended. So on August 29th of 2020, after 6 weeks of basically nonstop work, where we had interviewed members of the Mayor's Community Task Force on Policing who were represented from the Tampa community, all different neighborhoods, positions, socioeconomic statuses, education levels, gender, and we wanted to see what did they feel about the police. And we did this through 2 major methods. The first one was a survey. We wanted to make sure it was anonymous and they could really say how they felt. But there was only about 40 people, so I wouldn't say that's representative of all of Tampa. And then the second was, let's say they say, I don't trust the police. Well, I wanted to hear why. So we had these very in-depth focus groups that were, I think 10, 16 hours in total. So there was 3 different days, 4 hours each that we got to interview and talk to them. And it really shaped our findings and understanding what was going on here in our community. After we understood what was going on, we took that knowledge and made these recommendations. So there were 17 of them for the Tampa Police Department. You've probably seen the website, so I won't go over this verbatim, but I will say the vast majority, there's already been action taken that's been completed or action taken that we're starting progress to implement these different reforms. So for instance, I'll start with one of the bigger ones was building trust and legitimacy, which is of course easier said than done. If I had a magic wand to address this, obviously I would have recommended whatever that solution is, but one of the better options that the research has shown is available is procedural justice training. I only recommended things that were evidence-based, that I could look at studies and show this worked in another community, so hopefully it'll work here in Tampa too. So in addition to recommending procedural justice training, I also said I wanted to evaluate it, because I want to make sure that whatever we're doing is effective. We can't just assume that this is a solution. I really want to see the data and make sure that's the case. To that end, I, just a few weeks ago, implemented a community-wide survey. Perhaps you may have seen it or taken it. We asked members of the broader Tampa Bay community, or excuse me, Tampa community, to respond and tell us on a host of measures, from did they trust the police? How did they feel? What were their feelings on Tampa Police Department's process on all 5 of these pillars I'm going to discuss? We also, as I'll mention a little bit later, asked them things like what type of trainings would they like to see implemented. So I got a lot of really good data, but this is my baseline. So now, a year from now or so, when after these, for instance, procedural justice training is implemented, we're going to do another survey, and we're going to actually see, was there an impact? And I want to actually see that effect in the data. Another big finding that I had was increasing transparency. One thing that community members constantly told us was, how can we trust the police when we don't even know what's going on, or we don't understand the policies and procedures? So we really wanted to address that by making sure that all the policies are available online, which has already been done. Also, which is important to me as a researcher, but also it was important to our community members, was seeing all the data available on police stops, calls for service, complaints, compliments, a host of issues that we can now have in real time. So there are some that are available like literally real time. It took a little bit of IT finesse to make that possible on the TPD website, and there's some that I think they're still working through to make sure that it's not, on a monthly basis, or of course, as it was before, annual basis, that we can see it as citizens in real time. Okay, finding number 2 was on policy and oversight. So this again was a big concern of citizens. They felt like, how can we trust the police when there's misconduct? That a great quote of someone said to me was, if I did something wrong in my job, right, I would be held accountable. I'd like to see the same for my police department. So that really resonated with me, because I certainly feel the same way. And so we wanted to make sure that misconduct was addressed through increased accountability, but also transparency on these policies. So one, which seems so timely given the conversation that you all just had, was implementing body-worn cameras, which of course has been done, but importantly to me, having clear policies on use, including clear policy on camera use turning on and off, and sharing of footage with the public. So that was one of my recommendations a year ago, and obviously the policy has been updated, as you just heard, and I think it's incredibly important that moving forward, body-worn camera footage is released in its entirety, as you saw, I'm sure, on the news earlier this week, and quickly to the public. And so the policies have been updated in accordance with Department of Justice recommendations. I also recommended that the use of force policy was updated, so there was attempts to de-escalate in all situations and appropriate response of force. As you know, the use of force policy has been updated to specifically include de-escalation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about de-escalation in a moment. Another one about preventing problematic officers. So the TPD had an early intervention program, which is relatively innovative. There's only a few agencies around the country that do it, out of about 18,000 nationwide. But I did recommend that they expanded it, because there were certain metrics that I thought were very important from the research that I've done and seen to predict potential problems in the future that were not included. And on top of that, I thought the window was a little small. It was about 90 days that they looked in the past for that data. And so I wanted to expand it back to 2 years. And they're working on an automated system to be able to do that, but they've already done it manually, where they're looking at 2 years in the past to make sure that that data is being captured and included in this EIP program. In terms of technology and social media, obviously this is incredibly important. My students all have TikTok accounts, and I was, basically forced to have a Twitter account. So I appreciate that this is incredibly important for not only communication, but for connecting to the public. I think this is very timely and relevant. So what TPD has done has been to try to improve their social media outreach. As you may have seen, they just created a social media account on Twitter that's entirely in Spanish to connect more to our citizens that speak Spanish 100%. So I thought that was very important. So we make sure everyone feels included and they understand what's going on with the police department. In terms of Pillar 4, community policing and crime reduction, one thing that has been shown to be effective at building trust and perceptions of legitimacy is community policing. A lot of people commented to us, you know, it's one thing to see the police driving through my neighborhood, it's another thing to know the officer's name. And it's another thing when the officer knows my name and is willing to, you know, talk to me, stop and chat for non-enforcement reasons. They're not trying to get intel out of me or develop me as a source, just to know me, to understand, you know, what things are happening in my neighborhood. And so there's a cops out of cars model, community-oriented policing model, and this has really been embraced and, as you probably know, has been implemented in TPD. There's been a decentralization of officers that were originally based at headquarters and now have been out in the community to spend more time in the neighborhoods that they're working with. But I don't think that alone is enough, right? Because you can still, you know, have the same maybe mentality, just doing it on foot versus, you know, at headquarters. So finding 10 was to change the evaluation metrics to emphasize and reward action supported of community policing. My background is in psychology, so I'm very strongly believing in operant conditioning, and if we reward certain behavior, that's what we tend to do. And I think it's important if we reward community interaction, then we will see more of that occurring. So they've actually changed some of the evaluation metrics to say, if you stop and talk to a citizen for no enforcement reason, just to speak with them and get to know them, that actually counts on performance metrics now. In terms of number 11, this was very important, particularly at the time, but I think evergreen in the sense that this will be increasingly important in the future. Having a documented policy of police restraints whenever possible, and philosophy ensuring protesters can safely and legally express their First Amendment rights. So this was something that we thought was incredibly necessary and important just to protect people that are peacefully protesting, and that is something that TPD and Chief Dugan in particular has been very, I think, supportive of, and saying that that's something that he wants to do. In addition, I thought that it was important to increase the burden on the police department to make sure that no-knock warrants are only used when there are clearly stated exigent circumstances, and this must be approved by the chief of police in addition to the judge as normal, and that has been now formulated into policy. Finding 12 was to incentivize hires from our community. I think, you know, me having had time where I was in law enforcement and a female in law enforcement, I thought it was really important that we further diversify our police, you know, ranks, and incentivize people from Tampa, from all different, you know, socioeconomic statuses, people who maybe couldn't afford college or afford to get the education and training we want to see in our police department, to be able to increase diversity and training and community relations all at the same time. There were scholarships that were available from TPD. They're working to increase those. I've also personally been working with some of our professional sports teams and other donors and philanthropists in Tampa who want to support this specific initiative and provide funding and scholarships for people from communities here in Tampa to be able to get through the academy, get the education and training to make our police department more diverse and representative of Tampa, so they know the community because they grew up here.
Dr. Fox?
Yes, sir.
The legislation that is going through the Florida legislature now on the anti-rioting, how do you believe that jibes with what your task force?
Yeah, so Chief Dugan and Mayor Castor were asked a very similar question last week. I will parrot their answers, which is that bill, I think, is intended to address, is it violent protests and so forth. I think the initiative, you know, or the intent from the bill, and I'm not that well versed in it, so please hold me harmless if I get it incorrect. But I think that was supposed to address violent protests. In this case, it was meant to protect our peaceful protesters, even from any type of police engagement. They should be allowed to peacefully protest without any, engagement or issue.
And that legislation does not run afoul of that protection.
Again, I am not a lawyer.
Okay, good.
So I'm not sure that my comment on that will be the most informative. But from what I have heard, that does seem to be what the interpretation is.
Is it
I didn't know there was
possible?
any lawyer questions.
If you will.
I know she wanted to finish, but just on that point, is it possible, if you get information, that you would share it with us if you continue to work with your task force on what your opinions are from there?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yes, of course. Thank you. And I can certainly consult others that have more awareness of that bill and the law than I do. Okay. This is still pillar 4, turning relationship building into a policing philosophy. So again, I was very opposed to just like, let's check the boxes off and let's do this just for, just say we've done it. I really think that it's important that it's infused in our philosophy of policing as a model. So trying to ensure that occurs, there's a host of recommendations there. Any type of police community interaction that improves our understanding of the citizens improve their understanding of police officers. One of the really novel ideas that came out of the task force was reverse ride-alongs, and having officers spend some time with citizens to see what it's like, getting to work, taking 2 buses. What is it like walking through their community at night when it's dark and the lights are out? So things that I think would just further increase officers' understanding of citizens. And then, of course, for citizens is my next recommendation, for them to have increased opportunities to participate in the academy and in ride-alongs, because I think it's equally important that our citizens are familiar with what our police do. Yes, sir.
Dr. Fox, reading this, it reminds me when I was in the military and I was in Iraq and Afghanistan and North Africa. One of the things we did was when we were doing operations, we would operate from a central location known as a FOB, and then during the day we would go into the villages and then come home, much like how we did years ago in Vietnam. We learned our lessons very quickly, the hard way. So we migrated to what was known as Village Stability Operations, or VSO. I'm sure you've heard of this, basically living in the villages. So I'm reading all of these great initiatives you're doing. Is there any data on Tampa as well as other cities which indicate that police and law enforcement officials that are integrated in their community and are actually residents of that community? Is there any correlation, like positive
Yes.
statistics? Could you share that?
Yes, in many cases I was able to include the exact studies that showed that, and I believe it's on the website, and if it's not, I will send it to you so you can actually see those studies. But for a variety of reasons that has, the positive effects that you mentioned. For one, it's not seen as us versus them. Police aren't the other, they're my neighbor. And then also, I think it's important that police officers understand the dynamics of a community. If they were living there or raised there is even better, right? They really understand every single thing about it, versus being assigned to that location where you're kind of walking in. That was me, so I understand it. I was in law enforcement. I was just assigned to an area, and you learn, right, as you go, but you will never be as wise or as well versed as someone who lives there. And then just, of course, from a community trust perspective, that I think that is so important. It's not just, and I've heard this multiple times, there's several people on the task force that had family members or friends, siblings that were in law enforcement. And they said it was just really helpful to know that, it was, Steve, who lived in their neighborhood and it almost felt like they were saying they were less likely to arrest somebody that they could have helped, because they may have known that person for a long time. They may have understood some of the dynamics. They may have known that person had some, trying experiences in the past and really needs help, not an arrest. So that's the kind of knowledge that you get from living there versus, being assigned to work there. Great question. And perspective. Okay, so here we go. This was Pillar 5, implementing effective, high-quality, evidence-based training. So I hope I'm conveying throughout this that, to me, one of the most important things is that there's got to be research to show that these things work. I wasn't willing to recommend anything for Tampa that I wouldn't have already known works in some other community, because I didn't want Tampa to be our guinea pig case. So that's, you know, the core behind evidence-based training and recommendations. So one of these was to implement de-escalation training. And not just any, I specifically recommended PERFS, which is the Police Executive Research Foundation's Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics of ICAT de-escalation training. And the reason I recommended that is this is one of the few de-escalation trainings that has been subject to rigorous evaluation. Isaza et al., 2019, there was another paper by Robin Engel, which is forthcoming, and both of those showed that this specific model improved both use of force, or the lack thereof, I should say, complaints against officers, improved trust in the police departments, and importantly, I think it was another component is this incentivization of de-escalation and a constant reminder to de-escalate when possible. So all of that comes in this, ICAT training, where it's not just a sit for a few hours and receive your training. I mean, even they recommend down to the police reports to specifically state all the different types of de-escalation that were used in every engagement if necessary, and it serves just as a constant reminder, this is what we're incentivizing, this is what we're rewarding, this is what we want to see from you. So it's just infusing it as a philosophy rather than a check-the-box training. So that's why I really like the ICAT model. So this one, we've already taken steps to try to get TPD, the ICAT training. However, as you can imagine, there's a very long line for this. So we are currently in the queue. I am trying my best, as well as TPD, to get us moved up on that list if possible. One of the ways is to actually offer it across the whole Tampa Bay region. So other agencies, not just TPD, but other participating agencies, and that will actually help get a few of them trained, not just TPD. Finding 16, we're almost there, was to reinforce trainings through internal and external culture. As I mentioned, I don't think, I've had to do many a training in my time, and I know that when it's just a training and you can check the boxes, that doesn't always last, versus currently constantly reinforcing it through culture and through rewards. The last one, this was a specific issue that came up after the murder of George Floyd, which is a question about funding and resources for police and what we should be doing. And there was an overwhelming sense that we should be taking some burden off of our police departments in terms of calls that they may not need to respond to, and allowing other people that have more training and expertise in those specific types of calls, such as mental health experts, social workers, people with substance abuse training, to be able to respond to those calls in particular. So that led to the development of a co-response model, which you may have heard of. This was quite an undertaking. Here in Tampa, there are actually 4 different agencies that are now participating in our co-response model, which will soon be implemented. It was, very, very complex, right? Because you can imagine these agencies have never done something like this before. Trying to understand, who would be on the shifts, who would be off, what calls they would respond to, how they're going to determine all of this. All of this has been looked at, and not just by me. There's another USF professor who's called in just to help out on this specific element, and they've done an incredible job trying to put this all together and under this time frame. They've done some ride-alongs together, just trying to make sure that all potential issues could be addressed before they go live, and they're hoping to implement, I think, imminently. So this one, there has been action taken, but it's not quite done yet.
So is there a partnership in the community like with agencies such as Crisis Center of Tampa Bay?
Yes. let me see here. I don't think I have a list of all of the agencies, but I know DACO is one of them.
DACO, yeah.
Yeah. There are 4 agencies participating. I can get you the names of all 4.
Crossroads, right, because then it ties in all the other issues with mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, all those agencies in our communities that are problem-solving courts use. Because I work in the Veterans Treatment Court.
Oh, wow,
So
great.
it's probably part of that community. I wanted to hear that's a good point, and you need to leverage your community instead of just putting all the burden on the police, because they're not configured just for that.
Yeah, and so I should mention too that in this, on the Mayor's Task Force on Policing, we had several police officers that were part of it. And, you know, they were in agreement. At least the police officers that we spoke to, they said, you know, we want to, you know, outsource these calls. This was not something that they were particularly enthusiastic about doing, and they were strongly supportive of it. So this one actually had overwhelming support. People were really excited that this could be possible and implemented here in Tampa, and, you know, we are almost there to make it happen.
Your website indicates they are working with the Crisis Center and DACA, Grace Point, Northside Behavioral are the other ones. So
Thank you
just
so
so you
much.
don't have to make a list for us.
Thank you so much
You're
for looking
welcome.
that up. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So, yes, those were the, I guess I briefly talk about this, the 8 can't wait, as you probably have heard. These were the 8 recommendations to, you know, quickly and efficiently address some of the major problems that were being reported across the country with policing. And all of these have been addressed through policy changes and programming in TPD. And they were, I believe, validated from an external party as well. So with that, were there any questions that I can answer?
Well, I definitely want to applaud the effort and the energy taken to consider the public view and receiving such data. I also want to applaud that you're already utilizing the data and having some action taken. So that's a very great start. I am eager to see more conclusions. I was going to wait till your end of presentation to bring up that one factor that I do see some conflict that we may have to look into is the findings of number 11 under Pillar 4 with the community policing and crime reduction versus that anti-riot bill that's on the table. So I definitely want to see more in reference to how that's going to play out to ensure that there's no contradiction in that magnitude. Other than that, you know, it's a great start. We conducted a survey of our own, and it brought up a lot of data that we were also able to implement in our agenda as well. So kudos for that, and continue the great work. Is there any other questions for Dr. Fox? Any comments, Ms. Sky?
First of all, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us. I have been on the website, I've been reviewing the stuff. I did request for us to get a presentation because I think it's important. And as the chair mentioned, we did this policing project with NYU. We didn't have as broad a reach as you had, or someone like you to step in. I mean, I'm very impressed with what you've done, and it's going to help us in a lot of ways, because I think we can use a lot of this information when we review cases, and we can go back to this and know what actions are being taken. And this isn't, as you said, it's evergreen. It needs to keep moving. Every day things change. The society changes. But I am very appreciative of you being here tonight and helping us better understand the project.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that.
Dr. Collins?
A couple of questions. First of all, I want to thank you for a very excellent presentation, a thorough presentation as well. But I want to probably ask a couple of questions. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think they just hit a couple of them, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask you. When you did the survey that the task force did, by chance, did you have an opportunity to review the task force that we did with NYU? And I wanted to know, I asked them because I'm trying to find out if there was any overlapping questions, and did you find there were some collaborations between what we saw and what you all found out?
I am so glad you brought that up, both of you, that you brought that up, because I'd seen the survey, but I only saw the aggregate data, but I wasn't able to do any type of deeper analyses from. So I would, if you would like for me to do any type of deeper analysis, especially any type of looking at variations across your measures by different demographics or anything, I'd be thrilled to do it. And especially if I can have your raw data and then compare it to our data. We can even track changes over time. So I'd be thrilled to do that. That would be wonderful.
And I would ask that we provide Dr. Fox with whatever it is you need, because it would be great to see that correlation and what happened. I know how many we ended up with, and I know you had, as you indicated, a much broader base. And if that was feasible before you went out with your second survey, because it may be able to feature some questions, even if you don't get a chance to do all of the analysis,
Yeah.
just the opportunity to see the raw data might help you in building your next survey. So it may be some inclusive data that may not, but may be much better. And I wanted to ask, do you remember the total number that your survey reached?
Yes, so that's a tricky, I'm going to come at this like a scientist because there's quite a bit of data. We had about 250, I think, 2 responses, which is not, everybody in Tampa is far from everyone in Tampa. But this, again, was a online survey. It was on TPD's website. They tweeted it out. We practically were begging citizens to respond. The reason why I gave you the caveat was because there's some missing data. So some people filled out some of it and not all of it. So when you talk about how many cases were 100% complete across all measures, it's going to be less.
But at least you were able to reach about 250 individuals.
Correct.
And then when you get our raw data, look at our total number. I can't remember, but I think it's somewhat comparable.
Okay.
So, yeah, because I think our numbers was around that. We kind of actually extended it because we were begging to, and we had to go out to try to get some more information as well. That's 2 of my questions. The other one, you talked great about under number 4, pillar 4, community policy, policing and crime reduction, and scholarships, and before the education and scholarships. I want to ask, when you looked at the various different organizations, I already asked you the question about the anti-protesting bill, so let me check that one. I want to ask you, did you take a look at an effort to recruit by looking at the HBCUs, and then after leaving the 4 HBCUs in Florida, then looking down at FIU and maybe FAU, which have, and some at UCF as well, that have a very large Hispanic population as well. And I'm just curious, particularly if we're looking into those institutions. TPD, I'll compliment them, actually was going up to Florida A&M University at an annual job fair and then went back and had their own time. Did you do anything in that area in trying to reach out to the African American and the Hispanic or Latino communities?
So I guess my answer is no, not yet. Not to my awareness. I have not, and I'm not sure if TPD has, so I can get back to you on that. However, I will say, maybe as a plug for USF Criminology, my department, we specifically have been going to historically black colleges and universities here in Florida and trying to recruit students to come to our graduate program. We actually have an agreement with Bethune-Cookman University, where we've been taking students that are outstanding and giving them full scholarships so they can get their PhDs at USF Criminology, and then hopefully go on and impact policy and practice in their way. So I would say our major collaboration with TPD has been with USF, and our department is doing a lot to try to encourage students, particularly from minority communities and minority backgrounds, to get involved either in a police department or to get a graduate degree and to go on to influence policy and policing. I'm glad to hear that, and I would encourage that from the task force perspective with TPD, because I know that TPD was doing at least 1 or 2 previously in Tallahassee at Florida A&M. They were going to the job fair, and then they went back and told them you could have your own time with the department, and they were going up to do that. I don't know if they're still doing it. We're in the midst of the pandemic, so a lot of that may be on ice at the moment, but
I wanted to ask that question because in relationship to training and education, and if you call it ICAT, where I heard most of my information about ICAT was from Lincoln University. And have you done anything for, as it relates to the task force, in trying to contact Lincoln University, which is the first HBCU that have actually created a law enforcement program at their school? And I think they have a law enforcement person that's running the program.
No, I have not contacted Lincoln University, but I would be thrilled to, especially if we can gain some insight or research knowledge. For instance, I mentioned that I wanted to do evaluations on these programs, and one of the best things you can possibly do is reach out to researchers that have already done these. Ask, what measures did you use? What did you wish you had included? And then we can gain benefit from their work by implementing it here. So I would be thrilled, especially to collaborate and to include them in any type of evaluation and learn from what they've done.
I would encourage the contact. I don't know how far they are in the process, but I would encourage outside of the state of Florida, Lincoln University, which actually is one of the first HBCUs that have its own program, just on law enforcement alone.
Wonderful.
And that kind of concludes my questions. My biggest question was how we collaborate, because I want to make sure as you move forward with the task force, because many of the things that the task force has clearly laid out, I want to indicate that these were many of the things that the CRB had already worked on, has helped and assisted with the grants in order to get the body-worn cameras, and they were already out there, and policies being adjusted. And it's important that the community know that this task force is very important. It's have an outreach beyond where ours, but there need to be, some collaboration between the two so we'll know what each other is doing. Thank you so much and great work.
Absolutely, and thank you very, very much.
And we did have 601 participants in ours. And, well, we worked very hard didn't we? We worked very hard in getting the community involved, the churches involved, everybody we could reach out to. But I'm curious to know if who in the city still has this report? Yes. Do we still have copies of the report that we could share? I mean, I think I still have them, but
I can certainly look into that. I'm not sure if we have the raw data or if NYU, but I certainly have the contacts still, so I can reach out to them.
Well, I've got the reports. This is my report, the report that I wrote on back when we did it, but I can look and see. I may have the end report, and I'm glad to share it.
No, I definitely have the end report. I just didn't know if there's additional data that she's going to want,
right,
the actual surveys.
Okay, well, if you can check on that, that would be great.
But I can see if we can get the actual data, and I'll certainly provide the end report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Schmidt. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Brianna Fox? Well, thank you again. We appreciate the presentation, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, and thank you for your service to our community.
And please come back as you develop more information and share with us. Thanks.
Absolutely will. Thank you all.
Okay, we will now continue with the agenda, moving forward with item F, review of investigation. Tonight, we will be reviewing PSB/IAU case number 19S-006 concerning the conduct of officers following a traffic stop, which led to sustained violations for MOR number 1001, personal conduct, MOR number 1200, professional conduct, as well as MOR number 1210, courtesy to the public.
Good evening. I'm Detective Neil Smith with the Tampa Police Department's Professional Standards Bureau, which is commonly referred to as Internal Affairs. Tonight, we're going to be discussing TPD Internal Affairs case 19S-006. The synopsis. Officers Clark and Miguel were assigned to the Ybor area and conducting a proactive patrol. They conducted a registration check of a paper tag attached to a vehicle. The response that returned advised that the tag was previously assigned. They verified the tag, ran it a second time, and it returned to a previously assigned vehicle. At that time, they conducted a traffic stop. The driver did not immediately stop, but slowly continued to drive until coming to a stop on 7th Avenue. As the officers started to exit their vehicle, the driver moved again, finally stopping in a parking lot. The driver was extremely agitated during the stop and believed the officers had no right to pull him over. The investigation did not show sufficient evidence that Officer Clark and Officer Rose did not represent the standard of conduct expected of a Tampa police officer. Officer Miguel failed to use due diligence while investigating the stop and issued a criminal citation that was not warranted. The case summation. On November 16, 2019, at approximately 2300 hours, which is 11 p.m., Officers Clark and Miguel conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle for attaching a tag not assigned. During the traffic stop, the driver became confrontational, and when asked for his identification, he stated that he did not need to give the officer his ID. About this point in the stop, the front passenger started to record the interaction with his cell phone. The interaction became elevated as the driver questioned the stop and was still hesitant to identify himself. Officer Clark reached into the driver's side window and took the license out of the driver's hand. After he had the license, he asked for the passenger's identification. The driver denied his request and continued to talk over Officer Clark. Officer Clark elevated his voice to attempt to gain control. Officer Miguel, who approached the passenger side of the vehicle, decided to place a stop stick under the tire of the vehicle due to the vehicle not coming to a complete stop, and he felt the vehicle may attempt to flee. Officers Tracy and Jackson stood by during the stop and had no real interaction with the driver or passengers. Officer Lateef stood near the driver's door, and Officer Rose stood near the passenger door. Patrol Officers Niepert and Lamb arrived on scene, as well as Officers Lamb activated his body-worn camera. While Officer Clark walked back to his vehicle to verify the driver's license, Officer Miguel attempted to explain to the driver why they believed that the vehicle was unregistered. The exchange became heated because the driver believed he had the correct registration for the car and handed Officer Miguel the vehicle registration to the temporary tag. Officer Miguel took the registration, walked away to verify the information with Officer Clark. At this time, Officer Lateef stepped in and attempted to de-escalate the encounter. The driver was initially upset with Officer Lateef, however. Officer Lateef was able to take the driver out of the vehicle and calm him down. He was able to explain the stop and reasons why the officers who pulled him over were investigating his tag. While Officer Lateef was speaking with the driver, Officer Rose began speaking with the passengers. Knowing that the encounter was being recorded on video, Officer Rose decided to agitate the situation by stressing sarcastic concern towards how the teenage passengers were being raised by their parent. At the conclusion of the traffic stop, the driver was issued a criminal citation for operating an unregistered vehicle and left the scene. Officer Miguel failed to notice on the NCIC hit that the temporary tag had been replaced by a permanent tag. The citation was issued in error and was later rescinded from the clerk of the court. Disposition. Based on the complete review of all audio, written documentation, departmental policies, procedures, and regulations involved in this case, it was concluded the following. Officer Miguel issued a citation failing to do his due diligence in researching the vehicle's registration. The charge of manual of regulations, personal conduct to wit, manual of regulations 1005, standard of conduct, was sustained. Officer George Clark failed to maintain his professionalism during the stop in regards to controlling his emotions through dialogue. The charge of Manual Regulations 1200, professional conduct to wit, Manual of Regulations 1210, courtesy to the public, sustained. Officer William Rose failed to maintain his professionalism during the stop in reference to his comments to the passengers of the vehicle. The charge of Manual Regulations 1200, professional conduct to wit, Manual of Regulation 1210, courtesy to the public, was sustained. That's the completion of that incident.
Detective Smith?
If you will, Mr. Tamayo.
Just want to put this in context. So this happened on November 16th. It was a Saturday at 11 o'clock in the evening. So it wasn't as if they were in the midst of a Needlepoint festival. That you're in the middle of Ybor City. It's
Correct.
late at night on a Saturday. When they ran the registration check, the term previously assigned, what does that mean?
Previously
Previously
assigned.
assigned to another vehicle?
Yes, well, what happened in this situation, let me explain it to you. When the officer ran the tag, we get back what's called a hit. And in that hit, what you're supposed to do is, and you're taught this, you're going to get something on the first page. You have to continuously scroll down because you could also have a hit from warrant. And it may be several people of like descriptions and heights, but you have to scroll down, and then if that would have happened, they would have seen that the registration was applied for a tag.
Got it.
That was what happened in that situation.
So they literally did not scroll down enough.
It was literally not scrolling down enough to see that information.
Okay.
Detective Smith, if you will, I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, but there seems to be a big misconception out in the public, and I want to ask this question for our viewers at home. Under the belief that a citizen does not have to comply with an officer when asking for identification, where is the line in reference to the law when an officer asks for identification, the citizen believes that he's in the right, so he does not have to comply, and typically escalates into more verbal altercations and incident? Where does the law stand in reference to citizen rights versus police knowledge and information?
I could have a lengthy answer to that, but I'll summarize it for you. It depends on the situation. If an officer is investigating a crime and he has a legal right to detain someone and ask for identification, or there's something suspicious as a traffic stop, the person who they're talking with does have to provide that identification. Now, a police officer can approach anyone and talk to them in a consensual way. If it's a consensual, they could walk away and they do not have to give their ID. But the difference in this case is that the officer was well within his rights to stop the car, and when he asked for the ID, he was in his legal rights to ask for that identification, if that makes sense.
Thank you for your clarification, which also brings me to another question. We spoke about the impact of today's youth and social media and via cell phones. We spoke about body-worn cameras and various meetings. Where does the law state in reference to citizens recording incident via cell phone? In this particular case, one of the passengers took it upon themselves to bring out their cell phone to record an incident for their own personal support. Where is that line drawn? I know we have officers that are armed now with body-worn cameras, but is that a conflict of interest? Is that a right of the citizen? Just for my viewers at home to kind of know where they stand, and are they in violation of law or are they within their rights?
Yes. So in this incident, I believe the passenger was the complainant's son, so he was live streaming that. But to your bigger question, you could get into like wiretapping laws, which, in other words, does that person have a right to privacy when they're being recorded? If you have a right to privacy, you can't record someone without their permission. But in a public place, there's no restraints on that, no restrictions.
So if I'm in the car with someone in a situation like this, and I don't think it's going right, and I know that the tag may be right, I have the right, my right to just go ahead and record.
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Smith, when
Tamayo.
there's a reference here to Officer Clark reaching into the driver's side window and taking the license out of the driver's hand, did he cross any lines there that he should not have crossed?
In this instance, and I actually viewed the video, the driver had the license out, the window was down, so part of the license was actually out of the window, and Clark took it from his hand, or took it from him.
Good. And just to clarify, one of the passengers was the son, child of the driver?
Yeah, that's what the complainant stated, and he stated that on video, that this is my son, and he doesn't have to give you an ID, and which no ID was taken from him.
And also, Dad was hearing the comment made by the officer about the parenting skills.
Yes, that's Officer Rose, yes.
Okay.
Sir, I've got 3 questions. You
Try
had
to
mentioned
read.
earlier
Let's
that
see,
Officer
Mr.
McGill failed to notice on the FCIC hit that the temporary tag had been replaced by a permanent tag. I interpreted that, and I could be wrong, I'm a layman. I interpreted that as the permanent tag being a permanent license plate.
He had a temporary tag that, from what I understand, was not attached to that car. Okay, he had just bought the car a few weeks ago, but he did apply through registration for a temporary tag, which he did, which I don't believe he had at the time.
Okay. Second question. On the charges against, on the reprimand given to Officer McGill, it states what he was given was Manual of Regulations 1005 Standard of Conduct. The action or the inaction, if you will, that he did was he really didn't do due diligence when he was looking up, as you had described earlier. So this standard of conduct, is this kind of like a general catch-all? Like anything falls into this bin?
It is a wide regulation
I got
that encompasses a lot of
It's
things.
like conduct unbecoming.
Correct.
I got it. Okay. And then the third thing is, in the very beginning, when Clark and McGill interacted with the driver, you know, I'm reading the facts, and then it was only later in the description that several other officers started coming to the scene, and the last one that was mentioned was Officer Lamb, but it was Officer Lamb who activated his body-worn camera. So I guess my question is it safe to assume that neither Clark nor McGill had a body camera?
That's correct. I believe there was only one officer, which was Lamp, that activated, that had a camera at that incident. This was 2019, and the rollout
Right.
of the body-worn cameras.
I understand that the context, we actually had that discussion in last month's about when this whole body camera thing started and when the police were starting to get equipped with the body cameras. My question to you is from a policy perspective, same scenario, but if Clark or McGill had a body camera, would the procedure be, or is it now, one or both of them would have activated it because they first interacted with the vehicle and the driver?
Yes. Anytime that you're investigating an incident, the policy is now that you will have your camera turned on. Your camera will be turned on
Okay, thank you.
through the duration of the stop.
Detective Smith, in that incident, Officer Lateef seemed to have some success with de-escalating the incident, getting the motorist to comply outside the vehicle. Did we make any notation or are other officers aware of what tactics did Officer Lateef use that could have been shared amongst the team to get better positive results?
I don't believe that, as individuals, officers, that was done. However, and de-escalation is a big thing with our department now, and there will be training on that. Officer Lateef had not had that training at this time and did that. He was observed by the officers at the scene, and they talked for probably 5 minutes or more. So, but there was it wasn't told to them that this is what you need to do in that situation. But again, that training, the de-escalation training is coming.
Lateef's service on the force was how many years?
At that time, I don't know the exact. He was not a new officer at the time.
He was not a new officer?
No,
So he was an
sir.
officer with some experience
Yes.
versus Officer Rose and Officer Clark and McGill's. I'm trying to see, was there a comparison in reference to the experience play a role in his positive reaction versus these particular officers not being on the service or not being on the force as many years? I'm just trying to see if making a comparison. Do we have that information?
Well, from what I understand, that they all had about the same time on.
Okay.
6 years.
Okay. Okay.
Detective Smith, how many passengers were in the car?
I believe it was 2. There may have been more in the back seat, but because of the camera view, I wasn't privy to who was in the back seat.
And was Officer Rose aware when he made the parenting comment that they were the children or teenagers of the driver?
I do not know that, sir.
And when the word teenage is used, do we know roughly what the age range of the passengers were?
I do not.
In addition to Detective Smith, in the report, it stated that one of the officers used voice elevation to regain verbal control. Is that a training method? And if so, when and how positive are those results in the incident, such as this particular case?
Well, yes, it is part of command presence.
Command
Is
presence.
what we would call that, because as an officer, and you get to a scene and you do have to exude a command presence, and because you have you have a job to do, but that is something that we are trained to do.
Any other? Mr. Tamayo?
Detective Smith, were there any underlying issues in this case that are not readily apparent from the facts that we've read of any racial profiling?
No, sir.
So the race of the driver and the passengers had really no underlying issue there whatsoever?
No, sir.
Okay. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. The driver did not stop initially.
Correct.
Then stops, sees the officers leave their vehicle, and then continues again off of 7th Avenue to a parking lot off of the beaten path. I just want to make sure that we've got the context here. So, doesn't stop initially. I am assuming they're in Ybor City. This is now a valid traffic stop. The lights are on.
Yes, sir.
He's not stopping.
Correct.
He then finally stops.
Yes.
The police officers get out of their vehicle, and then he proceeds again.
Yes. For a few feet.
Well, for a few
Yes.
feet, but to a parking lot. So he gets off of 7th Avenue and proceeds, I'm sure, more than a few feet. Keeps going, and then finally stops, and then their initial engagement with the driver is one of great agitation.
Yes.
He's confrontational from second one.
Yes. That's
But
correct.
to clarify, the text here says as officers started to exit their vehicle. That could mean just cracking the door open, feet on the ground. What is that? What is the extent of exiting the vehicle?
That just means that they were getting out of their vehicle, opening the doors, getting ready to approach the car.
I think it's clear that, that we need to also put in context, many of us who are in leadership positions in our community indicate that you need to stop in a clearly lighted public area for your own benefit of safety. And so that goes back to questions regarding community policing. There is an existing distrust, an existing feeling of being profiled in the community. Is a realistic, based on perhaps what is not happening in Tampa, but what is happening in other parts of the country. So I think it is important to indicate that context. Perhaps the person was trying to get to a safe area so that he could be safe in his interaction based on historical data that we're all aware of.
That happens. It happens more than people think. That motorists, when it's late, and 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, they're scared. The lights come on and they want to go to a well-lit area, and there's nothing wrong with that.
So what is the attitude of the officers situations like that? Is it perceived as being belligerent and non-compliant, or is it something that is understood and allowable behavior?
Well, there would have to be many factors involved in that. What was the driver's behavior when the police were behind them? Were they swerving? Was there something emitting from the car that we can smell if their windows are down? To keep, now your sense of suspicion is raised a little bit. So there's several factors as to why we would approach a car the way we would do it.
So there is some training that would not automatically put that person in an adversarial situation just because they went to a lighted area?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Detective Neil Smith? Thank you, sir. I selected this particular case to help educate our viewers and also shine light on what you will across the nation, a pattern of incident, how a simple traffic stop can escalate to a serious incident. And due to lack of education, due to lack of training and things of that nature. So that was the purpose of selecting this particular case, to shine a little light on how a simple incident can easily turn into something major. So the question before the board is whether we agree or disagree that the investigation and its findings were consistent with department policy and procedure. Is there any further discussion? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, do we want to do separate motions for each of the 3 officers, or just do them in tandem, in unison?
Only if one feels that there's discrepancy against any particular motion, will I find it necessary.
Well, so I will move that we sustain as a Citizens Review Board the findings in all 3 officers' cases.
Board member Mr. Tamayo has made the motion in sustaining of all findings were consistent with department policy and procedures. Board member Irene Guy has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? We'll continue with the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Next on the agenda is item H, CRB staff reports and business. Mr. Schmidt, if you can, approach the podium. Do you have any announcements?
Good evening. I was looking through your packet that's been provided to the board. If anybody wants, I think I noticed some of the manual regulations that may have originally been provided have been updated. So I'm going to send out a new revise all the recent manual regulations just to make sure you all have them.
Thank you.
Other than that, I've got nothing else for the board.
Do you have any updates in reference to the past workshop performed by City Council in reference to the Citizen Review Board updates or upgrades?
No, sir. I believe that last month's report was after the workshop. And since that time, City Council hasn't met to discuss that matter. So we're still, I can't remember the exact date. It's coming up. But at this point, nothing's changed from last presentation.
Do any of the board members have the opportunity to participate in that workshop or have any knowledge of where they are and what was discussed and where they're going from here?
I do have a.
Chair, were you invited to the meeting?
Only the first workshop, I received notification and participated.
Well, I do believe they should be letting us know when and where, so even if they don't officially include us, that we could be there, so we could know. It's probably, there might be something on the website that tells us when it is, but you know, I know we're all interested in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that maybe Mike Schmidt, you can just keep us updated and keep us aware of what's going on with that so we can participate as much as possible. Be greatly appreciated.
I have a question.
Dr. Collins?
Mike, when I looked over last year's information, Mr. Smith, I noticed that on 3/20/2020, we received an arrest data for 2 or 3 years prior to that. It was very useful. It was all of the use of force review. And I'm asking, is it feasible and possible for us, since we've passed that 3/20 date, if we can now get an update for 2020 that we would receive in 2021? And I'm not asking for it immediately because I don't know the time it took, but the way the last one was, it was a very thorough, detailed report. And if we could get that report again, that would be great.
Yes, sir. Dr. Collins, you're very perceptive. That is something that was currently being worked on. We were hoping to get it to the board for tonight's meeting, but it's not ready yet. So hopefully we'll have it ready for you next month.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was a great report, and I'd like to see that again.
And it also supports transparency and accountability as well. So it was a
it
very
does.
useful tool. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I guess the only other thing I'm going to still say, and I'll probably say it at every meeting.
Yes, we're going to continue with the agenda to item I for announcements for the next meeting.
Well, actually, I was under new business, but it fits very well up on the announcement for the next meeting.
If you will,
And I
Dr.
just-
Collins, please.
I just want to make sure, as we had spoken previously, about making sure that the meetings are being sent out. I know I'm still getting some notifications for some other meetings that are under this kind of, I'll call them quasi-city. And if there's something that we can do as a board, I'm willing to assist in any way to make sure that the meetings are noticed. I know we were going to have a website, or it was going to be on the city website, or we was going to send it to the media, but whatever it is, to just make sure our meetings are noticed.
Well, didn't we initially ask that it be part of the neighborhood distribution? And that really, I don't believe, has ever been done, and I'm not sure who's heads the neighborhood association for the city anymore, but, you know, that certainly it would be a good way to do it. It comes up on Nextdoor. That's used by a lot of people in a lot of different communities. That would be a great way to do it. If we could identify who, I'm sorry, I don't really know who that is anymore.
Yes, that was brought up in several of our meetings, and I am aware that also came up with the upgrades and updates that they're planning on doing for the Citizen Review Board. So I don't know why it hasn't been implemented just yet, but it is on the table to be implemented along with some other things as well. So just given the benefit of the doubt, maybe they're putting a package together to ensure that the people gain access of the information of our meetings and be able to be more likely to participate. So I know that is something that is being conducted in the background. That's why my concern is where they are with that and how close are we getting to a conclusion. So.
And what we can do as a board if we need to assist, because that's what we had talked about previously. If that's something that we need to assist with, because we understand the limitations of the city staff and the pandemic and everything like that. But I don't want people to come back later and say we didn't know what was going on. If they know that they're having a task force meeting, the mayor task force, and they are aware of what's going on there and the information is out there, then I want to make sure that they know that the CRB is meeting and what we're doing as well.
Absolutely. Any discussion in reference to the next meeting?
We're going to have one.
Yes.
To see if y'all are paying attention.
So the next meeting would be held May 25th here at 315 Old City Hall, East Kennedy Street, 3rd floor, 6 p.m. Board members, for any reason you're unable to attend the next meeting, please notify Madam Secretary Debbie Mercer at least 48 hours in advance so we can ensure a voting forum. Are there any final comments or questions? Citizen Review Board is now adjourned. Yes.
Hold the water and put it through some kind of pipe work